So my name is Joey Brown. I'm the general curator here at Hope Zoo. I've been here for about 3.5 years now, almost 4 years. And so pretty much I'm the overall kind of manager, kind of anything involved with animal care and the animals around the zoo. So I have a team of about 15 full-time zookeepers, a full-time veterinarian and a vet tech, and we have about 1,500 animals in our collection, ranging from lions and zebras and camels to crocodiles, snakes, and birds. And so I kind of oversee the whole care aspect, feeding, health, husbandry, exhibit design, all that stuff. That's kind of what my job encompasses. Before this, I worked at the San Diego Zoo in the US for 5 years. I did my master's degree from the University of Oklahoma, studying critically endangered iguanas in Fiji and critically endangered crocodiles in the Philippines. Kind of studying animals in the wild, how they live, what do they eat, so we can better protect them. And then I ended up coming to the zoo because the zoo has a world famous conservation program for our Jamaican iguana. And so that was kind of the first attraction. I wanted to be at the zoo, but then also be involved with some wildlife conservation, which we can talk more about as well.
So a little history, do you know of the...
Yeah, so Hope Zoo actually opened in 1960, and it was, opened by the government with the Hope Botanical Gardens. And it's been kind of a staple in Jamaica ever since. We get elderly people that come to the zoo all the time, and they grew up here, coming here as kids. And so it's pretty much government run up until about 2010, and is when Mr. Kenny Benjamin and Guardsman Group kind of took over the zoo, Hope Zoo, to start running it privately. At this time, the zoo had been kind of run down. The government wasn't getting a lot of funding and support for the zoo, and so it was just kind of somewhat falling apart. And so Guardsman agreed to take it over and put a lot of their own money into turning it in what it is today. And so now although we're inside Hope Gardens, we're technically kind of separate. We're run privately now with the Hope Zoo Preservation Foundation, which is a nonprofit, a charity. So everything, all the money that comes into the zoo, whether admission tickets, food sales, all that stuff goes right back into keeping the zoo running. And so since 2010 to today, it's been run by Guardsmen, and we're constantly expanding. The zoo itself is about 45 acres, but we have a lease on the land for the surrounding 200 acres, all the way up the hillside when you can see outside. And so we have constant projects of, expanding the zoo larger and larger, and kind of bringing it up. Our goal is to be up to international standards, to be not only the best zoo in the Caribbean, but kind of a world famous zoo, which we're definitely on our way. Besides just the zoo itself, we're almost like, people know us as Hope Zoo, but we're also the main and only wildlife kind of sanctuary, wildlife rescue center in Jamaica. So kind of what you don't see behind the scenes is in the back part of the zoo, we have a closed off area where we have a lot of rescue native wildlife, whether they're barn owls, yellow-billed parrots, our American crocodiles, that come to us, whether they're babies or orphans, or they have an injured wing. NEPA and even local civilians bring these animals to us, and then our vet and team work on fixing those animals, getting the medication, rehabilitating them, and then getting them released back into the wild. If the zoo wasn't here, pretty much those animals would have nowhere to go, and they'd end up dying. And so we are the main wildlife rehab center here in Jamaica, and so that's another thing where all our money, and we pay for all that ourselves too, because it's expensive. Barn owl comes to us with a broken wing. It stays with us for 6-8 months sometimes, getting daily medication, daily care, and then before it can be released back into the wild. And so there's a lot that goes on here, kind of behind the scenes, that most people don't see when it comes to wildlife. The zoo itself does an amazing job. I think, the main goal of people coming to the zoo is, connecting people to animals, especially exotic animals and our native wildlife here in Jamaica, especially young school kids, getting these kids up close to animals, not only, doing tours for them, learning about them around the zoo. And I think you have much more of an impact with anyone. Like, you can watch an animal or learn about an animal on TV, but I think when you see it in front of you, and maybe even get to hold or touch it, it has a much more impact of having some empathy and kind of awareness for these animals in the wild, and maybe And our goal is for when people leave the zoo is they have a bit more kind of awareness and concern for the environment, for taking better care of wildlife in general. Mm-hmm. Questions?
How many animals are currently?
No, speak up, baby.
Yeah.
How many animals are currently?
So currently, right now, our animal collection is about just over 1,400 animals in the zoo. About 500 of those are from in our Jamaican iguana conservation facility. So in the back of the zoo, to kind of give you a long story short, in the back of the zoo we have what's called our Head Start facility for the critically endangered Jamaican iguana. And so one of our biggest, most successful conservation work is for the Jamaican iguana, which there's about 45 iguana species around the world. And the Jamaican iguana is the most endangered, most threatened. And so it was actually thought to be extinct up until 1990. And then they rediscovered the small population living in the Hellshire Hills. And what they found out was that all the baby iguanas were getting eaten by invasive species, which are non-native species to Jamaica. So the Indian mongoose, feral cats that live up in the bush were eating all the baby iguanas. So the population was just declining and none of the offspring were surviving. So all these conservationists and local stakeholders, Hope Zoo, UE, the IOJ, UDC, NEPA, and some international collaborators came together in 1991 to kind of start this conservation project for the Jamaican iguana to save it, which was to have this Head Start program here at the zoo. So pretty much what we do is we catch up these baby iguanas as soon as they're born in the wild. We bring them to the zoo and raise them up for 4 to 5 years till they go from being, when they're born, just a couple inches big, to 4 or 5 years later till they're 2 feet long and almost, weighing a couple pounds. And so then we release them back into the wild where they're much stronger, much faster, and able to survive and escape those predators. And so kind of what's called Head Start program, because you're raising them up in captivity to give them like a head start on life. And so since then, since the mid-90s, we've now released over 600 iguanas back into the wild, and the population's doing much better. The animals are reproducing, and there's more animals reproducing, the population's growing. And so to initially answer your question, a big part of our collection is these 500 iguanas that were born in the wild that we're raising at the zoo before they're released back into the wild. Yes?
No, please.
Just like how you educated us about the conservation and the animal welfare, what steps have Hope Zoo taken to educate the visitors as well coming to the zoo?
So what steps have we taken to kind of educate people about like our conservation work? And so, the basic thing is we have signs all around the zoo on each of the animals. We're currently updating with a lot more signs, so as people walk around, they can read and learn about it. We have tour guides that are offered to groups that come. Family groups can get a tour guide, but then anytime a school group comes, they get a personalized tour guide that will, take them around the zoo and kind of, give them an hour-long tour, in-depth talk about all the animals. And then we do a lot of talks and workshop with various school groups. So they'll come, the schools will come, and sometimes, we'll give them a tour of the zoo, but then we'll focus talks on native wildlife, teaching them about some of our yellow-billed parrots, our Jamaican owls, the Jamaican iguanas, specifically educating about some of our local native wildlife. We do tours of the iguana Head Start facilities to take people up there and really kind of show them what we're doing to save the Jamaican iguana and kind of give them a background on that. A lot of people, they've never seen a Jamaican iguana in person, or let alone maybe sometimes Jamaican owls and some of our native wildlife. So it's really neat to see that up close and then learn about what's going on.
Right, so you spoke about the world famous conservation program that's here, and you said you worked at the San Diego Zoo.
Yes, yes sir.
So what makes this program that we have here stand out from that zoo or other zoos that you've worked at?
I think the biggest one is it's a really neat collaborative project. So a lot of times when you get to other countries, there's maybe one organization running this conservation program or running this project, which isn't always successful because it really is like a team effort. So the fact that we have Hope Zoo, NEPA, UDC, the Natural History Museum, and then we have even San Diego Zoo and Fort Worth Zoo have been some of our biggest sponsors and partners since the early 90s as well. They come down here every year to help with health exams on the iguanas, to help support field work. And so I think it stands out. One is the huge collaborative effort of all the various stakeholders involved. The longevity of the program, it's going on nearly 30 years now. And then now we're actually seeing success. So there's a lot of, in the conservation world, there's a lot of kind of efforts and conservation programs to, let's say, save this one animal, but a lot of times, unfortunately, they're not successful. You know, you put all these money and resources and people into this project, but you're not much seeing population growth or, you know, or habitat recovery. But we're actually seeing a lot of that. Like, we're protecting more and more habitat now. The iguanas are growing faster and better than ever, both in the zoo in captivity and in the wild. And so I think the whole aspect of the team effort and the success we're seeing makes it a very kind of famous project around the world. Mm-hmm.
How does Hope Zoo compare to other zoos in the Caribbean and around the world? And what unique features does it offer?
So Hope Zoo, I think in the Caribbean, it's one of the best, if not the best zoo in the Caribbean. There is Emperor Valley Zoo in Trinidad, but I think the zoo is probably one of the best zoos in the Caribbean, you know, and it's getting better every year. You know, we're now having more animals coming in to grow the collection. It is a bit more difficult to get animals here because we are obviously an island country, and you know, importing animals is a huge process. Flying and shipping animals is more difficult, so that's why it's a bit slower to get animals here. Whereas in the U.S., in a lot of these U.S. zoos, they can just, because to summarize it, like, no animals are taken from the wild anymore. That used to be done back in the 80s and 70s, but now there's breeding programs set up amongst all the zoos, whether it's elephants or giraffes. So all these animals are bred in captivity now, so there's no reason to take them from the wild. And so pretty much what you do is you kind of, different zoos swap animals. So let's say San Diego Zoo has some extra giraffes, and Dallas Zoo is looking, so they can just pretty much transfer those giraffes to Dallas Zoo in Texas. It's much easier. Whereas here, it's a bit more difficult because we have to put them on a plane or on a ship, and it's a much more difficult process. But we are getting more and more animals every year, and I think to international standards, like, you know, when it comes to, I've been to many zoos around the world, and our exhibits and the care for our animals is world class, you know, and we're constantly making them better. You know, we definitely have limitations with resources, and even, you know, funding sometimes is always a constant battle. You know, people don't realize it's expensive to feed and take care of 1,500 animals, you know, and all during COVID, you know, when we were shut down for several months, because we rely on people coming to the zoo to help. That money goes back into running the zoo. And so especially a lot during COVID, when no one was coming to the zoo, I still had all my staff here. I still had 15 animals to feed and take care of, you know. So that's just for us to open our doors, it's very expensive. So funding is always a limitation. And I think in the US, there's a lot more support and corporate support for zoos there. Like, a lot of zoos are nonprofit in the US, but then they have corporate sponsorships from various companies and corporations that donate, you know, this much millions of dollars every year to help run that. And we're trying to get more of that in Jamaica as well. It's just the funding has kind of always been a limitation here.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned this is a rehabilitation center.
Yeah.
And you provided medication to the animals.
Yes.
For the sick animals, what would you look for in a sick animal? Like, how would you treat them?
So it depends. So sometimes, you know, a lot of times, for instance, with birds, they come in, usually it's some type of wing injury, wing trauma, whether it was a baby bird that maybe fell from a tree, or maybe it was an owl that hit a clothesline. And so we first do a quick exam, and we can usually tell if there's major trauma or fractures in the wings. If needed, sometimes we do work a lot with the JSPCA, where we'll go down there and do x-rays on the animals and tell for sure if there's a fracture in there. But for instance, sometimes it might be an orphaned bird that fell out of the nest, has no injuries, but is really dehydrated, so we'll get it on some fluids and medications. So it's just a basic initial assessment when the animal comes in, and then kind of moving from there. A lot of times with the babies, baby birds in general, they'll have 2 to 3 chicks sometimes, and normally the strongest chick is the only one that survives. Sometimes the weaker chicks will get kicked out of the nest or kicked out. And so those will come to us, and we'll have to literally hand feed those animals for a couple months before they can start eating on their own. Yeah. Hmm?
I have
Sorry.
a question.
Come to you
How
next.
does the zoo prepare for emergencies or any natural disasters?
So we have plans, protocols, like SOPs, standard operating procedures in place for hurricane preparation, fire emergencies, animal escape drills. All that's kind of in place, and we do a kind of routine practice kind of exams or drills it would be. And so it's just something that's just part of our, just kind of like when you're at school, you may do a fire drill or something. That we do animal escape drills, we do hurricane drills, just so when it comes to happen, it's just like all the staff are on the same page, they know their place, they know their roles, and all the supplies are there, and it's ready to go. So it's just being prepared is the biggest thing, and that's part of getting up to international standards, because any zoo, accredited zoo is going to require that stuff. We have basic safety procedures in place, ready to go. Yep.
So in the past, have the zoo faced any legal or ethical controversies, and how have you handled?
Not since I've been here. I've been here the last 4 years, so I'm not aware of any legal controversies in it. So no, I'm not aware of any. No. Yeah.
How did the zoo manage to recuperate from the implications of COVID-19? Now, I know that Lifespan came on board in terms of
Yes.
donating, where it was a 340 milliliter bottles, where they would donate $100.
A percentage, yeah.
Anyone else that's coming there?
Not so much. I think Pepsi has come on board to help us with some. Pepsi's been a good sponsor, and we're trying to. Not really, since we're trying to get more and more of that, because like I was saying, like the whole corporate support is really big in the U.S., and we're trying to get that more common here to get people on board. But one thing we did during COVID is, I definitely made a point to educate people more about like our rehabilitation and rescue program, and we started a GoFundMe, a kind of donation thing where people could donate money to go to the zoo, and then with the GoFundMe, I started almost like an adoption package where people could virtually kind of adopt certain animals in the zoo. And depending on how much money, there's different packages where if you donate this much money, you get a picture of the animal you adopted and kind of like a certificate. If you donated, the next package up, people could get personal videos where we'd send a video with the zoo, maybe saying happy birthday to their niece or friend, with that animal in the video. So just different creative ways to help get people to donate and raise money. Yeah. Yeah.
Jamaica is currently going through a meteorological drought. Is this affecting the zoo in any way?
Yes. The drought is just like it affects everyone's day-to-day lives. It's like we're finally constantly trying to find ways to conserve water. We don't have any big, fortunately, any big aquarium systems here, but drinking water is key for all the animals. And so in preparation this, just from the years past, we have numerous tanks, water tanks around the zoo. We have reserve tanks built up. So during the drought, we have backup drinking water for all the animals. But it definitely is a constant battle, we're facing.
Are you worried?
Not worried in a sense. It definitely makes things more difficult, and we're constantly, with this year alone, we've already brought in a lot more tanks in various parts of the zoo just so we can have more backup water reserves. We do have like I don't know if you've seen it in the back of the zoo, we have our own kind of dam reservoir area too, so that's always something we have in place as well. So we have various measures in place, but it's always makes things definitely more difficult with fetching water and everything. Yeah.
You mentioned rehabilitation efforts for the animals. What are some of the other goals that folks have?
Some of the other goals. One of the big ones I'd say is I'd like to get a proper kind of wildlife vet hospital in place over the next year or two. Like I said, we're working with a lot of limited resources, but I would like to have a full-on wildlife hospital with additional. One of our biggest constraints is space and kind of enclosures and these aviaries. So for instance, a lot of these baby barn owls come to us, and there's different stages. First, they come to us as babies, and we have to hand feed them. And then over the next couple months, they start getting their feathers and learning to fly. And then once they get to adults, they need like a long aviary to start building it, because it's not like a bird gets their wings and start flying. You know, they get their feathers, they start building up those muscles, and they have to practice flying, and they have to get better and better. And so I want to have kind of more kind of available aviary space for them, so we can kind of quickly rehab these animals. But the vet hospital will be the biggest thing. It'd be kind of like a half hospital for the zoo animals, the other half would be totally dedicated to rehab injured animals with full-on, you know, x-rays, blood machines, radiographs, I mean, ultrasounds. And I think that would be the biggest, one of the biggest goals, and would be a huge success marker for the zoo.
So, what happens, my turn?
Hey, my turn.
What happens when you have like a lion,
Yeah.
needs surgery, a big cat, a big animal,
Well,
giraffe, anything that needs some surgery?
so a lot, which has happened with our lion before, and so what usually happens is, even at regular zoos, what they have to do is you kind of just have to do it right there. And so our lion one time got a really bad wound on his head. He scratched his head just somehow, probably maybe scratched it with a nail, and then flies get in there, you know, turn it into a nasty wound. And so luckily we have we work really closely with numerous vets around the island. So I have my own vet here, but obviously the more expertise and stuff you have, the better it is. So a lot of times when these large animal procedures happen, I have a team of various vets I can call, and they come to the zoo. We have to sedate, you know, we dart the lion, sedate them down, and we all work together to do the surgery right then and there. In the enclosure, yeah. So. No, a lot of times we may not have that option, especially sometimes if it's an emergency. And so, you know, sometimes we'll move them into a better space, you know, we'll put some tarpaulin down. But a lot of times we can just do it right there, and a proper thing.
What's
But,
your food bill like, monthly or weekly?
oh, I mean, it would be roughly, I mean, at least probably $4 to $5 million or so, at least. Oh, at least 4 to 5, probably at least million. Huh? Probably about monthly.
Monthly.
Yeah. So people don't realize, like, so I mean, yeah, people don't realize how much, like, you're like, oh, you just feed these animals. No, like, you know, our lions both eat 10 pounds of prime beef usually every day. So that's, let's say, 70 to 80 pounds of beef every week. We have kangaroos and flamingos and monkeys and camels that all require special food that's imported from the United States. Kind of like you guys, you know, you go to the store and buy dog food. Well, there's special kangaroo food that this one company in the U.S. makes. There's special food for flamingos that they need to breed and to, you know, live healthy animals. All that food is imported from this company in California, you know, every 3 months. We get large shipments of that. And so it's all these specific diets that add up that animal, you know, like.
Are you happy that having to spend that amount of money, you get back the response and the value in the Jamaican society, and what they get from out of the zoo, children, for instance?
I think that's what makes it, I mean, that's what makes it all worth it. Obviously, no one opens a zoo or runs a zoo to make money. Obviously, it'd be nice to get enough support and funds to break even, kind of, but I think seeing the impact it has, like, you know, maybe on a Thursday or Friday, and we have 8 to 10 different schools in here, and you have, you know, sometimes 800 or 1,200 school kids running around, you know, some with us holding a snake for their first time ever, you know, or touching an iguana for the first time ever, like coming in terrified, like, oh, I hate snakes, they're the worst things ever, and then 10 minutes later they have a snake on their neck having like a good old time. Like, that's the stuff that makes it kind of all worth it, you know. And I think that's a lot of times, I get people all the time like, oh, I'm against zoos or I'm anti-zoos. Like, I just beg you, come to the zoo for a day and spend a day here when all the kids are here and tell me that zoos are bad. Like, all our animals are like kids to us. They're like are part of our family. Like, my keepers take care of these animals like they're their own kids. So they get the best care ever. They have vet care. Whenever the slightest thing goes wrong, they get a cold, they have allergies or something. Our lion has the worst allergies ever from October to November, so he gets like, you know, different allergy meds. And so we take care of these animals, and they're happy and comfortable, you know. And then, you know, and then seeing the impact it has on, especially kids and people that aren't that familiar or comfortable with animals, is what makes it really worth it. Yeah. Good morning.
How do you ensure that the animals here have a high quality of life?
High quality of life. So we do have, I mean, they're checked numerous times a day. I have a full-time veterinarian, that, everything from their diet and their care is pretty much at the highest standards it can be. I bring in different veterinarians from the U.S., some of the best vets in the U.S. at some of these, San Diego Zoo, Fort Worth Zoo. These vets come here about once a year, do training with my vets, do training with my keepers to make sure, we're doing the best things we can. We offer them, we import food to make sure they're on healthy diets. We have any medications and stuff they need. We have that available.
How often did you say they were checked?
The animals are checked every day. So every day. So kind of how it's split. The zoo's split up into different sections, and each keeper has their own section. So within that section might be this, 200 animals. So that keeper, every morning is checking on those animals, feeding those animals, cleaning their enclosures. And so every keeper is assigned to a certain set of animals. So all the animals in the zoo are covered. And then the vet's here every day, doing daily checks on the slightest thing. An animal may get a cut on its arm or may start having a runny nose. And so they're immediately responded to right away.
One final question.
Yeah.
Jamaica has an issue with animal cruelty.
Yeah.
I think in general, but mainly stray dogs on the street.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask if there was ever a possibility or a consideration on Hope's part for a collaboration with the JSPCA for some type of program or rehabilitation program for those stray dogs.
Yes. Well, one thing we've already started. There's two things. One thing we've already started is, I don't know if you're familiar with it's getting ready to launch here in 2 weeks, is our animal therapy program, where we're partnering with JSPCA, the Ministry of Health, the Montego Bay Animal Haven, and we now have a therapy dog where we're going to be starting off at Bustamante Hospital and working with various kids and patients at the hospital, and we have a therapy dog, Teddy. He's a golden retriever. He's about a year. I've been raising him at my house for about a year now, and we're going to start doing probably visits once or twice a month to the hospital with Teddy, our dog. We've already done some practice rounds. We bring a couple rabbits, a couple turtles, some birds from the zoo, and we go hang out at the hospital with all the kids there and the patients. And the staff too, the doctors and nurses love it. And this is a common thing in the US, like these therapy animals and stuff. So that's one thing we're starting with, like just the hospital kids, but we're gonna eventually grow that and start doing school visits as well. And specifically with the dogs, and then JSPCA normally brings a couple puppies and kittens, and kind of building that bond with these animals. So, next time, and it's already seen huge success because the kids, they're like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And, they love to see, they get all excited from the dog and puppy. And then I also want to eventually have our own dog kind of here at the zoo. So we have our petting zoo area, so we obviously have our turtles and rabbits and snakes and stuff, but then we also have our zoo dog, who kind of will help build that relationship when kids come to the zoo to get more familiar and comfortable with dogs, and hopefully think twice about stoning a dog on the street, or maybe helping an injured street dog that they might see there and maybe calling someone that can help it. And so that's kind of like the long-term goal is just building that connection and more empathy for these animals. But we work really closely with JSPCA. So yeah, the biggest thing is just, obviously starting, especially with the kids, because they're going to be the next generation coming up, and it'll be more kind of care and awareness for the street animals. Yeah.
When it comes down to volunteers, and how does somebody go about volunteering here?
So we actually get a lot of volunteers and interns, especially from UE, UTech, CASE, and then basic volunteers are just interested pretty much we have an email at the front desk that you can email and let them know you're interested in volunteering, and then we'll send you a link that you can just go ahead and fill out your basic info, and then you just let us know your kind of days and times you want to come. And we take, sometimes people come on the weekdays, sometimes it's a weekend, sometimes people will come all day, or sometimes they just come a couple hours in the morning. So eventually your first couple times you come, I partner you up with one of my keepers, kind of get you shadowing and learning some experience. And then once you're here a while, we've had some volunteers that come, and then all of a sudden it's a year or two later, they're loving it. So I would just email. I can share my email with you after this, and you can shoot me an email as well. Yes.
You said the zoo is planning on having a dog. Are there any other species that the zoo is planning on importing or having, such as another zebra or other species of animal that we don't have as yet?
Yes, we should have some African servals coming in, which are like African servals, which are like exotic cats from Africa. They're like medium cats. They're, it's called Serval. They're really pretty. They look like almost like mini kind of jaguars. And we have, right now we have 2 female kangaroos. We're going to bring in some male kangaroos to get a nice breeding group. We'll bring in some llamas. I'm talking with Belize Zoo right now. They have a neat jaguar conservation program, and they get a lot of jaguars that were kept illegally as pets and that can't be released back into the wild. So we're trying to get one of those jaguars to bring here to the zoo. And then the long-term goal, and hopefully in the next year, if not 2, I want to try to bring in giraffes as well. I'd like to bring in elephants too, but elephants eat a lot. But that's the one thing is, with this wildlife hospital I was telling him about, obviously before we bring in these big animals, we need to have the resources and means to take care of them. If an elephant gets sick, it's not like a dog you can immediately start treating. It's a big procedure, so I want to have that hospital in place. You need to have all the medical gear, so when that elephant or giraffe gets sick, we're ready to go. So I think hopefully in the next few years we can be at that as well. Any questions?
Has there ever been a case since you've been here, or if you've heard of one previously before you came, 4 years ago, of an animal getting so sick that they had to be migrated to another country or being put down here?
No, you would never. We never ship an animal because it was too sick. Like, I'm trying to think. We never ship an animal. Occasionally we've had to. I'm trying to think of an animal we had to put down.
Or you had to
Like
put
you.
them outside of the country to get help and then back.
No, you wouldn't do that. Yeah, it's one that the government would never allow that, because it's like just to bring an animal into Jamaica, the paperwork and permit process takes about a year to 2 years. So it's not like you can just. That's what makes it so difficult being in Jamaica, because the permitting system to even send a blood sample from Jamaica to the U.S. is like a long paper trail of stuff before you can actually do that process, because everything's regulated very tightly. So we could never do that. If anything, what we would do is pretty much what I've done before is, like, let's say I had a really sick flamingo that had some, like, looked like some, we couldn't tell if it was a neck injury or some nerve damage. And what I've done is because I was at San Diego Zoo and I was really close with the vets there, I work very closely with them. So sometimes I'll literally FaceTime with the zoo vet. I'll be in the animal exhibit with the zoo vet from San Diego and FaceTiming with them, and they're actually helping us do the exam or treating the animal from California over FaceTiming, doing it just like that. And there's been times where we had like a sick camel, and I called was talking with the zoo vet in the US, but then I called one of our large animal vets here on the island who does a lot of horses and cows, which is, they're ruminants, similar like the camels. And so I called them to the zoo and they come right away, and we work together to treat those animals. Yeah.
All right, so there's 2 parts to this question. You mentioned just now about paper trails and customs, so I wanted to know how long it would take. I mean, apart from the paperwork, it's been like 2 years, and the next thing,
Yeah.
If there's money involved, and if there are any like government like waiver programs to like achieve that cost.
So I guess the first part was what was the first part of the question?
How long it took?
Oh, I mean, for instance, the servals, which I'm hoping, we'll be here in the next 2 months at most. I first started, a lot of times I build a relationship with a zoo or the people in the U.S., obviously building up, figuring out what animals they may have, and then the paperwork probably started, I'd say, 1.5 years ago. And that's pretty much a lot of it's here in Jamaica. We work closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Veterinary Service Department.